I'm here at the home of Ray Burgess. I met Ray last year at the Cole Burgess celebration after Cole recently passed. I saw Ray talking with Glenn A. Baker, and after they finished I went up and asked for a photograph, and then I just mentioned to Ray that I film musicians about their life, and Ray said, fine, give me a call. So here we are later at Ray's house, and I'm just going to ask Ray about his life in music and TV. And before we talk about the early career and your early life, I just wondered what you've been doing the last 3 years. And I noticed that your daughter was singing with you at the benefit too, so I suppose you've got a lot to do with her as well.
Last 3 years, I suppose. The most recent thing that I recorded was probably a little bit over 3 years ago with Johnson Peters out of Melbourne, a thing called Legends of the Southern Land, which you can find on YouTube. Swanee, Tommy Emmanuel and Marty Roan and myself, a tribute to Australians, a fabulous project which we loved. And other than that, certainly not much in the recording studio. I think the music scene has changed considerably over, well, probably the last 20 years, and a lot of people now record at home and just sell at gigs. It's a very, very difficult process. I've been able to help my daughter, Casey Burgess, not in any other way than words of advice, with her album Space to Breathe, which she released just at the end of COVID. She went to Nashville and she worked with some fabulous people over there. It's a terrific album. I say go and buy one. Space to Breathe. She needs the money because she's just delivered us with a grandchild, so she needs all the help she can get. But it's look, I'm still involved with music. I still do radio. That's community radio, and the main theme, I suppose, with that is to help working artists that have got new music that they want people to hear. The time is completely different now than when I was lucky enough to record in my peer groups. There's little or no what we used to refer to as pop radio. So if you've got new product, and it can be fantastic or it can be rubbish, it's nice to have somebody that's got a platform to be able to let people hear it. You could have the best box of cornflakes in the world, but if nobody knows that they're on the shelf, you're not going to sell them, and that's what it's like with music today. The Spotifys and the iTunes and all that are great for people to access music. It's free. It's I suppose the industry did it to themselves. They made it free so people could listen as a sample, and then nobody wants to pay. So most of the money that people make out of music these days is at gigs, and so you go along and support Australians at gigs, and you buy their CDs or pay the fees to do the downloads. But so my core probably over the last 3 or 4 years has been to help Casey Burgess with her ongoing music career, and help other artists where I possibly can through the voice of community radio, and there's still a lot of great music coming out. One from the peer groups, you know, the Russell Morris is down, but also new music from fabulous people like the Wolf Brothers, who just knock out brilliant songs, and it's always just a great pleasure to be able to help other Aussies where you can. I'm what am I, 74 this year, so I've had a long stint at being involved in the business. My first TV show was when I was 12. It was called The Happy Show in Melbourne with Happy Hammond and Princess Panda, and a mate and I did Please Please Me, and won a state savings bank book with I think a pound in it. So it's been a long journey. It's been a great journey, and I've enjoyed every single moment of it.
So Ray, when you first started, growing up,
Yep.
so most musicians, I listen to the radio, and you pick a certain group of musicians you like overseas and in Australia, but usually it's overseas first because that's what the radio were playing.
Yeah, typically.
And then you sort of get a style, and then so when you were growing up, what were you listening to, and did you have influences in the family in music?
I suppose both my mum and dad were good singers, certainly. Well, I was born in the spring of 1951 in Oakley, in Melbourne, Victoria. I always remember music in the home via the radio. So the house was full of music. Dad would sing while he was being a carpenter, and Mum would sing while she was being a seamstress. So we were surrounded by it. listening to the music of the 50s. You know, I loved the Perry Comos and the Andy Williams, and for me, anything that had a good solid melody, and particularly harmony groups like the Bachelors. And then I think I was 12 and I got a transistor radio for Christmas. Remember trans? You can, well, you can't say that anymore, can you? But it was a transistor radio. That's the safest way to do it. And in the Christmas holidays, I turned it on and I heard the Beatles and I Want to Hold Your Hand. I was already aware of the Beatles, but I heard that song and I reckon that changed my life forever. It was so powerful. It had such an enormous influence. And so I started then to listen and pursue that sort of more rocky type music that they took over the world with, absolutely. And then formed a band at school called The Living End, performed at local parties and the like. And towards 1968-69, I had a friend of my dad's who was in a talent quest at the Dorset Gardens Hotel in Melbourne, and he saw us, the Living End band, and said to my dad, you should get this kid to go on New Faces, because Ross had already done New Faces. So I did New Faces in Melbourne. It was called Kevin Dennis New Faces in 1969. It went for 6 or 8 months, and I was fortunate enough to be runner-up to the great John Williamson, and got offers of work through that. One of the judges offered me cabaret work in Melbourne and to join his agency. And then I got a phone call from a guy named Tony Scanlon, who taught me English at Clayton Tech School, and he said, I'm putting a band together, I'd like you to come and audition. And I went, sort of like hanging out with my mates, you know, we're playing Creedence Clearwater Revival and Led Zeppelin and having a pretty good time. But I went along to Tony's house in Springvale and auditioned with John Congdon, Chris O'Leary and Linda Barford, who was John Farnham's cousin. And I was just blown away. Their harmonies were sensational. It took what I was doing to a whole new level. They were called Red Time, and I joined that band immediately. Within a short time, we were working for Dennis Smith's hotel circuit in Melbourne 7 nights a week, and backing cabaret artists from the Wednesday through to the Sunday. Enormous amount of work, and we probably did that for about a year, very successfully. I was working in the bank in the early stages of that, Bank of New South Wales in Windsor, Victoria, and loved it, but I eventually fell asleep at work, and one of the bosses said, son, you're going to have to make up your mind whether you're going to be a musician, a singer, or work in the bank. And at that stage, I was getting $33 a week working in the bank and $100 a week working in the band and having a lot of fun. So I thought, okay, I'll do this for a short period of time and I can always come back and work in the bank. And 60 years later or 50 years later, never went back into the bank. Red Time was a fantastic band, very successful. Probably the downside of the whole thing was we never really recorded. We worked so much. We went to Perth for 3 months and stayed for 2 years. Came back, and due to Linda's relationship with Johnny Farnham at that stage, started to work with John. There were not many bands that read charts in those days, and every time John did a show, he'd be singing the songs that he was going to perform for anything up to 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours to get them right, then go out and do a 45-minute show, and it was harsh. So we learned all John's songs, we put 5-part harmonies behind them, and then we started doing gigs with him where we'd do, Red Time would do the first part of the night, and then John would come on and do the polish at the end. And so I learned a lot from someone with probably the greatest pop voice we've ever seen. We became good mates and worked a lot together. Red Time moved on from John, and then when we sort of ran out of steam, I guess through not recording, and I got offered a solo gig, and I took that in April of 1974 with a manager named Neville Kent, who had already had success with Robin Jolly. Where did we go? We did cabaret shows all over the place. That's Claude the Crow in the background, former friend of Shirley Strawn. And in December of 1974, Neville rang me at home, and we were doing quite a lot of cabaret shows. particularly in Tasmania, which was his home state, all over the regional Tasmania. But he said he found this song on Casey Kasem's American Top 40, and what would I think about recording it? And well, I just said yes. Listened to the song, thought it was great. It was by a female group out of the UK called Fancy, and they thought if it had a male voice on it, it'd be quite a hot little number for an Australian to sing. So we had no recording deal. We were working out of the offices of Lewis Young in Melbourne, which was Johnny Young and Kevin Lewis, and they were doing Young Talent Time and other things. Took it to them and said, if we record this, we pay for it. Would you release it through L&Y label with Festival? And they said, yeah, sure. But there's no point doing it now. It's December. This time of year, just before Christmas, Billy Joel, Elton John, every superstar in the world puts out a single to have it on the playlist for Christmas. And well, we were so keen to get it done that we did. Leslie Shaw produced it. We had some terrific musicians on, including Phil Manning on guitar, TCS Studios, John French on the panel, and Touch Me was born. We got it, sent it to Festival, and they said, yeah, it's great, we're going to do it, but probably not now. And we thought, no, go ahead. It was released on the 16th of December, and thanks to the music gods and a man named Mike Drayson at 3XY, it hit the playlist on the 24th of December 1974, and the rest is really history for that. It got played flat out for 8 to 12 weeks on high rotation, went to number 3 in Victorian charts and fairly high up the rest of the place. And then Countdown was born on the 8th of March. I already had a hit and I was on there, and that was the journey. It just started from there. Other hits, Love Fever from Harry Vander and George Young, 2 albums. The first one, Not So Pretty, released by Ross Wilson. I had a fan time with Ross, tough taskmaster. I'm still very proud of Not So Pretty. The best of the musicians available in Melbourne were on that. There's some great rock songs on it. I always say that I was the weak link, but Joe Camilleri said, no, without you, we wouldn't have had that album. So I've made a lot of friends along the way with those guys and have supported them all the way where I've had the opportunities. After Countdown, I was offered an audition for a new pop magazine program in Sydney. That was in 1976, and that became Flashes. So with a 6-month-old baby daughter, we hit the trail with up the highway with a trailer on the back with all our worldly possessions to the ABC studios in Sydney, and Flashes was on 5 days a week and was an outrageous success. And I was lucky enough, because I was on that, to get a lot of film clips of the songs that I'd recorded. They were expensive in their day, but they were supportive of me in doing that. During that time, Love Fever was a hit. Gloria was a hit, which became my sort of key song. Thank you, Van Morrison. And the journey went right around Australia, because the ABC's television went to every corner of the country, and so there wasn't anywhere when you were high profile like that you weren't known. So I toured everywhere. I've been to Cape York, Nalumbi in Groot Island in the north, to Esperance in the south, to Carnarvon, to just you name it. I was lucky enough to be there, all up through the Northern Territory, taking your music with you. So for me, it was a blessed journey. I've always said there are many singers and musicians that were far more talented than I. Why the star landed on my head, I'm not sure, but I'm very grateful, and I'm very grateful for all of the people along the way. And once the pop thing sort of faded, and you really only have a short period of time as a pop star or rock star, I was able to adapt to cabaret shows, concert shows, lots more television with Don Lanes, and Blankety Blanks was one of my fun times. Graham, I'd done an IMT with as a solo artist many years earlier, and was invited to do Blankety Blanks with Graham, and again, an enormous and outrageous success, and all of the TV that followed. Sadly, for those young performers that are out there today, there's really not much in the way of music television, and it was such a great platform. You'd have a record out or a tour out. There were 10, 15, 20 shows a week at Celebrity Squares and Blankety Blanks, and nighttime variety shows that you could be on to sell your wares, to show people what you could do, and all of that is basically gone now. It's the hardest probably time for any time in music that I can remember. I think I was one of the blessed ones, a little later than some of my great peers, like Billy Thorpe, Brian Cadd, Russell Morris. I admired those guys. Normie Rowe, I just thought was sensational. Ray Brown and the Whispers, the Easy Beats, they were my peer group that I looked up to.
John Paul Young.
And John Paul Young. Well, John Paul Young actually, on the first Countdown, or the first 12 months of Countdown, all of these new artists emerged. The first one I was on, Skyhooks was on. When that show hit TV with colour, it just leapt out of the TV screens and gave a whole lot of new artists like myself, JPY, Mark Holden, and Sherbet, then in colour. It just reinvigorated the entire industry. And from those 60s artists that set the pace for us, like Johnny O'Keefe and the wonderful Cole Joy and Paddy and all of those artists that performed in those 60s shows, the Sing Sing Sing, the 6 o'clock rock, that set a mould for us to go. I guess we were a little more refined when colour TV hit and the success path was made a little bit easier. But I still say that all of those artists that I still admire, many of them that are still performing fantastically around the country, were the ones who gave us the insider trading, the information on how we should go about a career. The one thing I would say that has never changed in rock and pop music is that the artists never really got the money that they should have got, because it either went to recording companies or managers or on the road expenses, and I think that's probably pretty much the same today. A career in music, kids, is fantastic, but I think unless you hit the golden egg, you're never going to make a whole lot of money out of it. And I've said to many people, I didn't get into music because I saw it as a money-making thing. I got into it because it was in here, it was in my heart, it was in my soul, and that expression was all I really ever needed to get the satisfaction out of what I was doing. The fact that it's the best job in the world. There's no job in the world where when you finish your work hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, that the entire place stands up and applauds and asks for more. That doesn't happen anywhere else. So that's the satisfaction that we as artists get. I'm so pleased that so many of my peers are still making great music. I'm comfortable in my skin that the music that I made that still regenerates with people, I'm still getting downloads on Spotify and iTunes for people who either their vinyl wore out and they've gone again. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the wonderful career that I've had and for all the wonderful friends that I've made along the way. It becomes a bit of a club, but it's great to see that they're out there and they still do it in many cases just because they love it. And that's the core of what we're about. I think we lived and recorded and performed through probably the best time in what we would say contemporary music history. From the 50s, the predecessors of mine, through the 60s, through the 70s, into the 80s, and I guess from then on it became more of a struggle. We don't have radio stations and televisions stations and programs to show people your wonderful new music, and that's an awful shame. But just love it, record it, treasure it, and all of those wonderful friends, fans, and we thank them, because without them none of us would have had any success whatsoever. It still goes on. Get out and support your local artists in your local pubs, in your local venues, because they live on what you give them. Music, Aussie music, it's a fantastic thing. Enjoy it.
And talking about TV shows, when you think of the contrast between Bandstand, where they had different artists every week,
yep,
and now you've got The Voice, where they get a set of artists that lasts for weeks and weeks.
It does.
So you only have, say, 7 people compared to over a couple of years of
and look, I
having a variation of people every
I don't like to criticise any music endeavour, any music program. There's a lot of people that go through X Factor and The Voice that are very talented people.
Well, that's all there is, isn't it?
Well, it is
so,
it is the only one. I guess if there's any criticism, and that's probably not the right word, but people that went on Bandstand and 6 O'Clock Rock and all those programs, they'd been working for years and years and years, to enhance their trade, and most of them were known performers to get invited onto the programs. I think that's a difficult thing to do today, and because it's a talent quest, I feel with those programs that the emphasis is more on the judges setting artists against themselves, and it's not about developing the skills that the artists have. I mean, there's not a lot of people that have won or been runner-up in those particular programs that have gone on for any sort of stellar career, and in many cases they make no money out of it. They're devastated at the end if they don't win, or they come out of it and they've got a huge debt to the record company or the television station because of the money that they put into building them up. I just think it's particularly sad. I don't know the answer. There is no answer. The other answer is to get out there and just learn your trade. I recall a story of one young man who was on one of those programs, and I think it was about the time they introduced auto-tune, and I had a conversation with some of the people who produced it, and I said, look, the guy's got a great image, but he can't sing in tune. And they said, that's okay, once he does the album, we'll fix it all up. I would have thought you had to fix it up before, but that's old school, and I'm happy to live in the old school. Anybody that gets out there on stage and puts themselves out there deserves recognition and applause and encouragement to keep on going, because I tell you what, music makes the world go round. All our history, our good memories, fun parts of our life, generally related to some music at some point in time, and that's the beauty of living it.
Well, there's three musicians that came off one of those shows, and that's Guy Sebastian.
Yep, brilliant.
Shannon Noel and Jessica Mauboy. Now, Jessica Mauboy, they went up to the Northern Territory, and she turned up with no shoes on. It was a remote,
back to country,
a remote area, yeah. And look where she's gone, and she's a good singer and performer and a hard worker.
Yep.
And those three, like Shannon, he lost his father and lost his farm, and Guy Sebastian, to me, my friend watched it, and I watched it with him, and Guy Sebastian, I thought, he's got a really good variation. He's not just...
Look, I mean, and the proof's in the pudding. Guy Sebastian, I think, won that. That was a very early one. Yeah. And he's still got a stellar career. He's a sensational singer and songwriter. Shannon's the same, hard-working rock and roll singer with a great voice. And young Jess, I've seen her perform live in a very close, confined thing, and another one that's got great talent. I don't know why that progression. There's a young bloke named Casey Barnes, I think came 10th in one of the early ones, who's now got a fantastic career in country music, and he's fantastic. But if you weigh up the amount of people that have gone through those shows year in, year in, year out, there hasn't been a lot that have actually stuck at it. And maybe just because it's too hard, and you do other things. But there's been some outstanding talents come out of those particular programs on TV.
And it is a big thing because Sony are the company that run it.
Yep.
And they'll put up a lot of money which you have to pay back.
Yeah.
So if you haven't got the audience, like you said, to pay it back, well, they're just going to have to say, look, we can't do anything anymore.
Well, I know there has been particular cases, and I don't want to use anybody's name, but I know there are cases where particular artists, after those talent type TV shows, had enormous success, big hits, albums were number one for a period of time, and they've gone and said, where's my money? Where's my money? And they said, well, you haven't paid back the debt yet. Yeah. And that's the big trap. I had a conversation with Alan Lancaster before his passing a couple of years ago at a Status Quo, and when he was listening to Casey Burgess's album, my daughter, he said, who owns the music? And I said, well, there's variations. She's on all the songwriting. He said, no, who paid for the recording? And I said, well, Casey did. And he said, good, she owns all of that music. So if one of those songs gets requested to go in a movie, she gets the money for it. With bands like Quo, they didn't own the music, and publishers sold off their entire catalogues. And when things started to the unfavourable conditions, the band started to argue, started to break up. They went, well, where's our money? They said, well, you haven't got any because you've got this enormous debt. that's just one instance. I mean, the Bay City Rollers never got any money. There's this, as I said earlier, it's an older story as the Bible, with musicians and artists not getting paid. The only way that you can do it is take control of your own destiny, and I was very fortunate that all my recordings were done through Alan Y, through Johnny Young's label, and when he got out of that side of the business, he sent me a letter. He and his wife Kathy sent me a letter saying, we're handing over the rights to all of your songs, all of our publishing rights to your songs, your recordings to you. And so ongoing, I was able to do best ofs and greatest hits albums, and I got the money for the songs because I paid for the recording. So it's a lesson in the learning. Musicians are not accountants and they're not financiers, and that's one of the downsides. So for young people starting out, even anybody that's still in the business, and check up on all of those things. Pay your tax. Don't get caught, because it's littered with a litany of people who have just given up or fallen off the boat because they could no longer afford to go on.
Well, like bands I grew up with, Jimi Hendrix was taken advantage by his, but then you've got Led Zeppelin, where Peter Grant, no one could get anything out. He had everything for the band. The promoters had to work to him, not them to him. And
that's what you need.
You know.
I mean, and Peter Grant was a security guy who took on the management of Led Zeppelin and said, hey, that bag of money over there, I'll have that, thank you very much. And of course he was built like a man mountain, and nobody was going to say no. They did wreak some havoc across the world when they were the biggest band in the world, Led Zeppelin. There's a book called When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. If you want to find out about Led Zeppelin, have a read of that one.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, when the King of Pop in 75, 76, and Daryl Braithwaite won both years.
He did.
Do you think that was based on how they were promoted, or they were always played on the radio? They were on.
Well,
TV.
Sherbet were one of the biggest bands of Australian music, and Daryl was front man in the band, and of course the King of Pop was a popularity contest run by TV Week. And for 2 years there, I was one of the runners-up to Daryl in King of Pop, and it was nice to be in that company. But he was the most popular pop artist at the time, whether he was in a band or a solo artist.
And fairly good looking.
I reckon we should have had a separate category, and I would have had the little thing sitting there. But no, that just to be in the esteemed company of people like that for me was more than enough. It was a great experience, and we all still. I just requested from a lot of my peers voice recordings to assist the radio station that I work for, which is 2NBC in Sydney, 90.1 FM. And I can contact people like JPY, like Daryl, like Normie Rowe, like Russell Morris, Glenn Shark, all those people say, hey mate, can you just, if I send you the script, can you do a record for me? And I feel very blessed that I'm able to communicate with those people as friends, because I mean, I grew up as a kid with Shark friends in the twilights going, these people are gods. I had Normie Rowe posters and Easy Beat posters and Ray Brown on the Worcester posters all over my bedroom wall, never dreaming that one day I'd be fortunate enough to be inclusive. And I suppose one of the biggest, people sometimes say, what is the biggest thrill in your musical life? And I guess mixed with shock was the day that I'd been made aware that Touch Me had been programmed by 3XY in Melbourne, and we had the radio on in the office for most of the day and didn't hear it. And I was in my old beat up Valiant driving home on the freeway in Melbourne, and it came on the radio, and I had to pull off the side of the road and listen to it with tears in the eyes going, that's me. That's actually me on the radio. I'm now like one of them. Just a buzz. To this day, you think about that and it sends shivers up your spine.
So all those
Brilliant.
years of hard work, and here you are.
Overnight success.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well, as I said, at 12 years of age on The Happy Show in Melbourne, and then New Faces, probably 18, and then Countdown when I was 23, 24, 25. So, it's a long journey, and you never stop learning, and things change constantly. And I just hope that pop music or rock music is still around for when my grandson grows up and has something to... they did dress him in a Metallica T-shirt the other day and sent me a photograph. I'm not too sure about that one, but he won't wear a Casey Burgess T-shirt. That's his mum. But look, hopefully it just goes on, and you've got to be with the changes. I mean, country music, country rock music has made a huge inroad across the world because, again, it's lyrics that people can understand, it's harmony, it's melody, and I'm not a great fan of the hip hop variety, but again, there's so many people that love that as well. So it's all out. It's your genre. You pick the one that you want.
Yeah, there's enough styles for everybody.
There is indeed. Yeah, enough hats to wear.
Yeah. So if you don't want to listen to it, you don't have to.
That's it. That's what they always say. I hate that. I don't want to listen to that. Hey, turn it off.
Well, Ray, thanks very much for that. I've been
Greg?
wanting to do it for a whole year.
And we're both still here.
It's really good. Thanks for letting me come to your house.
But can I also say thank you for all of the recordings that you've done from Australian artists and people that you liked, and you love the idea of being able to record them. But at some point in time, when none of us are here, those recordings are going to stand up and people will be able to go back and say, oh yes, I'd forgotten about that, and put it on record, because much of it from the early pioneers is not a lot of interview footage. It's,
No.
you know, even when we started getting film clips turning up on YouTube when it started, Normie Rose said to me that this bugger all of me, because nobody filmed anything. When you did TV, it was live. It wasn't recorded. Even some of my early countdown stuff is not there because nobody had VHSs or recording equipment for home in 1975.
And they taped over all the...
They used the same 2-inch tape, recorded it on a is it Saturday or Sunday? Went live on a Sunday. They recorded it and they replayed it on the Saturday. And on Sunday they used that whopping big 2-inch reel all over again, recorded over the top of it. Somebody should be whipped for that time.
Yeah,
and send me a copy in the mail so I can see whether I told the truth or not.
Yeah, I will. All right, thanks very much.
Thanks, mate.
All right.
Cheers.